It's funny how life can surprise you. Just when you think you know exactly how a story is supposed to end, it takes a wild, unexpected turn that leaves you breathless. That's how I felt the first time I stood on the Olympic podium, holding my breath as the world stood still for a moment that felt like a lifetime. As the crowd roared, my eyes locked on the medal around my neck, bronze, shining under the Olympic lights. The sound of the cheers was a blur, drowned out by the thundering in my chest. My mind, however, was far away, replaying the long journey that had led me here. And in that instant, as the anthem played and I soaked in the moment, I felt a wave of conflicting emotions rush over me. Pride, accomplishment, relief, and oddly enough, a sting. You see, as I stood there on the world's biggest stage, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a message I wasn't expecting, but somehow it fit. "Tyler, we're so proud. Can you get us tickets?" The moment my parents texted, I froze. Of all the things I had imagined happening in this moment, of all the things I had dreamed of, the last thing I expected was to get a message asking for tickets to the ceremony. I stared at my phone, the buzzing sound like a sharp contrast to the roaring crowd. This was it, the culmination of everything I'd worked for. Yet, the people who had told me time and time again that I wasn't good enough, that I should focus on something practical, were now asking me for access to the very thing they'd dismissed. Was this really happening? I took a deep breath, looking out at the sea of faces in the stands. The roar of the crowd seemed to amplify in my ears as I stood frozen, my medal gleaming in the spotlight, but my heart felt distant. My parents had never believed in this dream. They'd never come to a single competition, never watched me run a race, never cheered me on. To them, sports were a distraction, a waste of time. Yet here they were, now wanting to be part of the moment they had always mocked. But it wasn't just their request that caught me off guard. It was the way it exposed everything I had fought against all these years. The doubt, the dismissals, the rejection. Their absence in my life and at my races spoke louder than any words they'd ever said. As I stood there, still processing what had just happened, I realized something. My journey had never been about them. It had never been about earning their approval or proving them wrong. It had always been about me, my belief in myself when no one else did. My refusal to be defined by anyone else's expectations. The truth was, their doubts had driven me. Their belief that I would never make it had fueled my fire to prove them wrong. But the one thing I knew for certain was that I didn't need their validation to know my worth. Not then. Not now. I didn't reply to the text. Not then. Not ever. As the national anthem played and the stadium filled with applause, I closed my eyes for a moment. This victory, this medal, was mine, and it was everything I had ever dreamed of. I wasn't just standing on that podium to show the world what I had achieved. I was standing there for every moment of doubt, every sacrifice, every early morning run when I felt like giving up. It had been a long road, but I had made it. And no text message, no matter how well-meaning, could change that. As I stood on that stage, the cheers still ringing in my ears, I felt a quiet, powerful realization settle in my chest. This was more than a medal. This was a victory for anyone who had ever been told they weren't good enough, anyone who had been overlooked or dismissed or told their dreams were impossible. So, to anyone out there who's ever faced doubt or rejection, who's been told their dreams are too big or unrealistic, I want you to know, keep going. You don't need permission to chase your dreams. You just need to believe in yourself and never give up, no matter how many people tell you that it's impossible. I'm living proof that the road less traveled is the one that leads to the most extraordinary places. Have you ever defied the odds to make your dream a reality? I'd love to hear your story. Share it below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button to join me on this journey. Because if there's one thing I know for sure, it's that we're all capable of achieving far more than we've been told. Chase your dreams, no matter who doubts you. They're yours to claim. Growing up in Atlanta, I was always the underdog in my own family. I wasn't the smartest, I wasn't the most talented, and I wasn't the one everyone thought would make it. That honor went to my sister, Emily. She was the family's shining star, the debate champion, the one who could talk her way out of anything and talk circles around anyone who tried to challenge her. Her trophies lined the shelves in our living room, collecting dust like forgotten symbols of her victories. Meanwhile, I was the one on the sidelines, the one who was always trying to find my own way. I wasn't part of the family's plan. No one thought I'd be an athlete. That path was reserved for the smart kids, the ones who were destined for greatness in law, business, or medicine. My parents were lawyers, and they had a very clear idea of what success looked like. And it didn't involve running on tracks or chasing a dream fueled by nothing but passion and persistence. I first discovered track in elementary school, but it wasn't until I was 12 that I realized how much I loved it. I could run, really run, faster than anyone else in my grade. The speed was like a high, a rush that nothing in school, nothing in life could give me. When I was on the track, I felt alive in a way I'd never experienced before. I remember the first time I asked my mom for running shoes. I was nervous, but I figured it was a small request. I told her how much it would help me improve, how it could even make me faster, maybe even give me a chance to win some races. I imagined the look on her face when I showed her my new shoes. But instead of excitement or even curiosity, she gave me that look. The same one she always gave when she thought I was wasting my time. "Tyler, focus on your studies. You're not built for sports." Her words stung like a slap. I didn't argue. I never did. I just nodded and kept quiet, retreating into the quiet frustration I'd come to know all too well. I could see it in her eyes. She didn't think I had it in me. To them, sports were just a diversion from what really mattered. A distraction from what I was supposed to be doing, which, according to my parents, was preparing for law school. I remember standing in front of her, trying to explain how much I loved running, how it made me feel like I was flying. But she didn't get it. She wasn't interested. And Dad, well, he was always too busy with work to notice anything outside of law books and cases. Emily, of course, was their golden child, the one they expected to achieve greatness, the one who was destined to follow their footsteps. Every dinner conversation seemed to center around her academic achievements, her debate victories. My state championship in track was barely a blip on their radar. It was like they couldn't even see me. At the family dinners, Dad would go on and on about Emily's latest win, how she had out-debated all the other students at her competition, how she was going to be the next big thing. Emily was always the star of the show, while I sat there, quietly watching, invisible. My victories didn't matter to them. The track trophies I'd won, they were put away in a box in the closet, out of sight, out of mind. I couldn't understand why they didn't see what I saw in myself. They didn't even try. All I heard was the same message. Law school is your future. It felt like their world was already mapped out for me, and no matter how much I tried to steer off the path, I kept being pulled back. It didn't matter how fast I ran, how hard I trained, how much passion I had for the sport. It was never going to be enough. But what they didn't understand was that the more they told me I couldn't do it, the more I believed I could. I remember one evening, just after I'd won another race at a regional meet, I overheard my parents talking in the living room. They were discussing my future again, but this time, I was listening. "Tyler is wasting his time," my dad said, his voice firm. "He's not built for this. He needs to focus on his studies. He can't keep chasing these dreams. It's time for him to face reality." That was the moment the seed of doubt was planted. But instead of accepting their version of reality, I made a vow to myself. I wasn't going to let them dictate my future. If I had to prove them wrong, I would. Every sprint, every mile, every sacrifice I made from that point on would be my way of saying, "I don't need your approval to chase my dream." But at the time, I had no idea how I was going to do it. I just knew one thing for sure: I would find a way, even if it meant training in secret, even if it meant sacrificing sleep and time with friends. I didn't need them to see my potential. I just needed to believe in myself, even if no one else did. And believe me, there were days when that belief was hard to hold on to. Days when I wanted to quit, but I never did. Somewhere deep inside, I knew I had what it took, even if no one else saw it yet. The road ahead was going to be tough, but I was willing to run it, no matter how long it took. It wasn't just the fact that Emily was always the one getting the spotlight. It was how she could walk into any room and instantly captivate everyone in it. I've always admired her, in a way, but I can't deny that there was a deep part of me that resented her success. And I know it's not what you're supposed to say about your sister, but it's the truth. Growing up, it felt like there was never enough room for both of us to shine. Emily was the golden child, the one who never had to fight for attention. From the moment she could speak, she was the one in front of the crowd, effortlessly charming teachers, friends, even strangers. Her natural ability to debate made her a force to be reckoned with. She had the gift of words, the kind of charisma that made people stop and listen. And that's exactly what happened. The world listened to Emily. My parents were constantly on about her achievements, showing off her debate trophies like they were some kind of sacred relics. Her wins were celebrated like national holidays. Emily's been chosen for this scholarship. Emily's going to compete in this national debate. Emily, Emily, Emily. At the dinner table, the conversation would always be about her. Dad would beam with pride as he recounted her latest triumph in the debate league, and Mom would chime in with how proud she was of Emily's writing or how sharp her analytical skills were. Meanwhile, I sat there, quietly picking at my food, feeling invisible. It was like they had already mapped out her future. She was the one they were going to watch grow up and become a success, while I was left standing in her shadow. I don't think anyone even noticed when I started running. My state championship in track, barely a passing comment. They didn't attend the meet. They didn't come to watch me cross the finish line. I remember the day I won. How every muscle in my legs burned, how my lungs felt like they were on fire, but how I kept pushing, my eyes locked on the finish line. When I crossed it and heard the roar of the crowd, I felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. It wasn't just a win. It was proof that I could do something on my own. It was proof that I could be someone, even if no one was paying attention. When I came home that day, holding my championship trophy in my hands, I was expecting something. Maybe a small acknowledgement. Maybe just a congratulations from my parents. But instead, Emily walked into the living room with another award from her debate competition, and the focus shifted immediately. The trophy in my hands didn't even get a second glance. "Mom, Dad, look at this," she said, her voice dripping with excitement. "I just won another state debate. I'm going to nationals next month." And there they were, their proud smiles flashing as they turned their attention to her. "That's amazing, honey," Dad said. "You're really going to go far with your talent." My heart sank, and for a moment I thought I might just break. The trophy in my hands felt like a weight, as if it was too heavy for me to hold. I tried to smile, tried to blend into the background, but it felt impossible. I knew what they were thinking. Emily was the future. Emily was the one who was going to succeed, and I was just there. For the rest of the evening, I tried to keep my thoughts to myself, sitting quietly as they discussed plans for Emily's next competition. I couldn't even remember what I had for dinner that night because all I could think about was the feeling of being invisible, of working so hard and yet never having it matter. But I wasn't going to let it break me. I knew deep down that I was more than what they saw, more than the overlooked kid who won state championships in secret. I just had to keep proving it. That night, I sat up late, staring at my championship trophy. I had never felt more alone in that moment. I ran my fingers along the cool surface, tracing the engravings as if they could somehow remind me that I was worth something, that my victories mattered. "I'll show them," I whispered to myself, my voice breaking the silence of my room. "I'll show them all." But there was something in that moment that changed me. I realized that it wasn't just about proving something to them anymore. It wasn't about their approval, their praise, or their attention. It was about me, about my journey, my passion, and my belief in myself. And from that moment on, I started training harder. I didn't care if they were watching. I didn't care if Emily was getting all the accolades. All I cared about was what I could do, what I could become. I would train in secret, waking up early before school to run laps on the track, sneaking in extra sessions when I should have been studying. Every stride was for me. Every sprint was an act of defiance, a promise to myself that I could make it, no matter who believed in me or who didn't. Looking back, I realize now that Emily's success, while painful to witness at times, fueled me in ways I didn't even understand. I didn't want to be her. I didn't want to follow in her footsteps, but I did want to be recognized for something I had achieved. I wanted to show the world and myself that I could stand on my own, that I was worthy of recognition. And I would. I would keep running, keep pushing, no matter how much it hurt. By the time I was 16, the routine of being ignored by my parents was almost second nature. I knew better than to expect any support or encouragement from them when it came to my running. Emily was still their star, and my passion for sprinting, that was just a phase, a childish distraction. I had learned to keep my dream to myself, buried beneath the weight of their expectations for me to follow a more practical path. But none of that stopped me from running. In fact, it made me more determined. Every day after school, when I should have been buried in textbooks, I was on the track. The school was just a few blocks away, and I could sneak over after my last class. There, in the quiet of the empty stadium, I'd run lap after lap, pushing myself harder with each stride, each breath. My legs burned, my heart raced, but I didn't care. This was the only time I felt alive, the only time when I could block out everything else and focus solely on my goal. I kept my training a secret. The last thing I wanted was for my parents to find out. They had no idea that I'd wake up at 5 a.m. to run before school, or that I'd sometimes stay up late, sneaking into the kitchen to eat something quick before heading to the track. I didn't need their permission, their approval. I didn't even need their understanding. I just needed to keep going. There were mornings when I would sit in the dark, tying my shoes and trying not to wake anyone up, and I'd feel a pang of sadness. Why couldn't they see me? Why couldn't they see what this meant to me? I knew they never would, but that thought didn't stop me from running. It only made me run faster, harder, with more intensity. After school, I'd head to the library, pretending to study while I let my mind race through the day's workout. The library was my cover, the one place where I could sit and appear normal while I waited for the right moment to leave. My friends never knew what I was doing. They thought I was just a quiet, studious kid who didn't have much to say outside of schoolwork. They had no idea about the fire that burned inside me, the one thing that drove me forward when everything else seemed against me. And yet, despite my secrecy, it didn't take long for my coach to notice. Coach Evans was a quiet man, a former sprinter himself, who had been running the track club for years. He'd seen a lot of kids come and go, but there was something about my determination that caught his eye. I wasn't the best runner, not by a long shot. But what I lacked in natural talent, I made up for with hard work and sheer willpower. One day after practice, he pulled me aside, his gaze sharp. "Tyler," he said, "I've been watching you." I froze, not knowing what he meant. Watching me. I didn't know what to say. He wasn't supposed to notice. I was supposed to be invisible, to keep my secret just that secret. "You've got talent," he continued, "but talent isn't enough. It's the work behind the scenes that counts. If you're serious about this, I can help you. I can get you into some national meets, but it'll take more than just running on your own. You'll have to trust me." His words were like a spark to dry wood. I couldn't believe it. Someone finally saw me, finally believed in me. For the first time in my life, someone wasn't dismissing my dreams as a joke. It was a turning point, a moment I would never forget. "I'm serious," Coach Evans said, "but you have to be willing to commit, to put in the hours, to train even when no one else is watching. If you can do that, we'll get somewhere." The idea of competing in national meets was a dream come true, but it also came with a price. I had to sacrifice even more of my free time, more of my already overstuffed schedule. But I was ready. I was used to pushing myself beyond what seemed possible. I was used to running when no one else believed in me, so I said yes, without hesitation. Coach Evans became my mentor, the first person outside my head to truly believe in me. He didn't care about my grades or my parents' expectations. He cared about the work I was putting in. He believed in the process. He believed in me. He entered me into my first national meet, and that's when I realized just how big the world of track really was. There were kids there who had been running for years, who had coaches and sponsors, who had everything I didn't. But I wasn't intimidated. I wasn't scared. If anything, I felt a sense of belonging that I had never felt before. It didn't matter that I was a latecomer to the sport, that I didn't have the same resources as the other athletes. What mattered was that I was there, and I had earned my place. I worked harder than ever, knowing that this was my shot, my chance to prove not only to my family but to myself that I could succeed. And then, there was the pressure. My parents had no idea about the extra training, the early mornings, the sleepless nights spent balancing everything from school to work to running. They still didn't take me seriously, still thought it was just a hobby. Emily, of course, was busy with her debates, and I didn't want to distract them from her academic success. So I kept pushing forward in the shadows, hiding my determination from the world, but refusing to hide it from myself. That secret training paid off, slowly but surely. I wasn't there for the trophies or the accolades. I wasn't there to prove anything to my parents. I was there to prove that I was worthy of the dreams I had. I was there to show myself that I could rise above the doubt, the expectations, and the barriers that were set in my path. I wasn't running for anyone else anymore. I was running for me. Coach Evans wasn't like the others. He wasn't loud or flashy, and he didn't make promises he couldn't keep. He was steady, quiet, and always watching. But the way he looked at me, like he saw something nobody else had, was something I couldn't ignore. The first time he pulled me aside, I wasn't expecting much. I had been used to people noticing me only in the moments when I was falling short. I was used to silence, to no applause, to no recognition. But Coach Evans, he saw more than just my time on the track. He saw my heart. "You've got talent, Tyler," he said, the words so simple but heavy with meaning. "But what matters more is your commitment, your willingness to keep pushing even when the world isn't watching." At the time, I wasn't sure if I was ready for this kind of mentorship. I had spent so long running on my own, hiding my passion, fighting the urge to share my dream with anyone because I knew no one would understand. But Coach Evans didn't ask for my story. He didn't ask why I had kept my running a secret. He just told me to trust him, to trust the process, and that's exactly what I did. He began to guide me in ways that no one else had. We'd meet after practice, late into the evening when most of the others had gone home. His style wasn't about shouting encouragement or setting unrealistic goals. It was about structure. It was about discipline. And most importantly, it was about belief. He saw my potential, not just the kid with quick legs, but the one with the will to work, the one who would do anything to prove himself, even when no one was asking him to. He didn't even care that I wasn't from the typical track background. Unlike the other athletes, I didn't come from a family that had the resources to send me to expensive camps or hire personal trainers. My parents didn't support my passion, and I didn't have access to the kind of elite coaching that many of my competitors did. But Coach Evans didn't care about any of that. He saw me for what I was, a hardworking, determined young athlete who was willing to sacrifice everything to chase a dream. He introduced me to the world of competitive running. He got me into national meets, those events that I had once only seen on TV or heard about in whispers among athletes who had the privilege to attend. But to me, these events felt like a distant fantasy, one that I had only ever imagined. Now, suddenly, I was standing on the starting line, surrounded by athletes I had only ever heard of, athletes who had been training since they were kids. And here I was, the outsider, the one who didn't have the years of experience, the sponsorship, or the fanfare. I just had grit. The first national meet I competed in was a blur. The noise of the crowd, the flashing lights, the feeling of being on the edge of something bigger than myself, everything was overwhelming. I remember lining up at the starting line, looking around at the other competitors, and feeling a rush of panic. These kids looked different from me. They were polished, well-trained, their form perfected from years of practice. And here I was, the kid from Atlanta who had learned everything on my own, sneaking in training sessions when I could, battling against my own doubts. But as the starting gun went off, something shifted. The first few meters were a blur, my heart pounding in my chest, but I kept my focus. I could hear Coach Evans's voice in my head, steady and calm, "Trust your training, trust yourself." I pushed harder, ignoring the fatigue, ignoring the feeling of my body screaming to stop. I kept my eyes fixed on the finish line, letting everything fade into the background. And when I crossed that line, I didn't know where I had finished, but I knew one thing: I had given everything I had. It turned out that everything I had was enough. I didn't place at the top, but I wasn't last either. For someone who had only been in the sport for a couple of years, that was something. And it was only the beginning. Coach Evans wasn't disappointed with my performance. He was proud of the effort. He was the first person who didn't care about where I finished in the race. He cared about how I ran it, about how I approached the challenge. That day was a turning point. I didn't need to be the fastest. I didn't need to have the best equipment or the best coaching. All I needed was the drive to push myself, to never stop fighting. And Coach Evans showed me that. He showed me that the difference between the winners and the rest wasn't just talent, it was heart. It was the willingness to keep going when everything else said stop. Over the next few months, I continued to work with Coach Evans. Every session was harder than the last. We drilled technique. We worked on endurance. We refined my sprints, honed my posture, and focused on the little things that made all the difference. And through it all, I could feel myself improving, becoming more and more confident. I was no longer the kid who had to sneak around to train. I was becoming an athlete, someone who deserved to be in the conversation, someone who belonged. The journey wasn't easy. There were injuries, setbacks, moments when I doubted myself, but Coach Evans kept pushing me. He never let me quit. And slowly but surely, I began to see the results. I started qualifying for more meets, placing higher, moving closer to the dream I had held in my heart for so long. I began to realize something as the months passed. This wasn't just about running anymore. It was about everything I had sacrificed to get here, everything I had fought against, everything I had believed in. It wasn't just my talent that would get me to the top. It was my resilience, my refusal to let anyone, even my parents, dictate my future. And through all of it, Coach Evans was there. A steady presence. A believer when I couldn't believe in myself. There's something powerful about having someone who believes in you, especially when you don't believe in yourself. Coach Evans didn't see me as a kid who was just passing through. He saw me as someone who could go far, someone who had the potential to make it, if only I was willing to work for it. In those moments when I was ready to give up, he was the one who told me to keep going. And it was his belief in me that carried me through the toughest moments of my journey. If I had learned one thing in all my years of running, it was that nothing in life comes for free. The track meets, the medals, the glory, none of it would happen unless I was willing to sacrifice more than most people would ever understand. And sacrifice became my daily routine. To pay for gear, to travel to meets, to make sure I could keep training with Coach Evans, I had to work. I didn't come from money, and I wasn't going to ask my parents for help, especially after the way they had dismissed my dreams from the very beginning. Emily's scholarships and accolades were the only things they cared about, and I wasn't going to let myself fall into that same pattern of seeking validation. This was my journey, my fight. So I took on a job at the local gym. It wasn't glamorous. I didn't get to spend time with friends or go out like the rest of my classmates. While they were out enjoying their teenage years, I was cleaning equipment, wiping down machines, mopping floors. But every dollar I earned went straight into my running, new shoes, entry fees for meets, transportation. It all added up, and it all mattered. There were nights when I didn't get home until 10 p.m., exhausted from a long day of school, followed by hours of scrubbing down sweaty gym mats and lifting weights to the sound of rap music blasting in the background. My body ached, but I didn't let it stop me. I had bigger dreams, and no one was going to hand them to me. I would wake up early, sometimes at 4:30 a.m., to get in a run before heading to school. My legs were heavy with fatigue from a night of scrubbing the gym floor, but the idea of letting go of my dream, even for a second, felt impossible. So I ran. I ran as if my life depended on it, because, in a way, it did. Every step was a battle against the voices that had told me I wasn't good enough. Every lap was a step closer to proving them wrong. And there were plenty of days when the world around me seemed to make it impossible. When the bills piled up, when schoolwork threatened to drown me, when my friends were out having fun and I was in the gym, cleaning the same machines again. But none of it mattered. All I could think about was my dream, the one that no one had supported, the one that felt like a mountain no one believed I could climb. Coach Evans had told me time and time again that success wasn't about just showing up. It was about doing the work when no one was watching, about making the hard choices every day. And that was what I was doing, every day. The sacrifice was never easy. The hours were long, and the loneliness of doing it all by myself was palpable at times. I had no one to lean on but my own willpower. But I had to keep pushing forward. It wasn't just about running anymore, it was about something deeper. It was about proving to myself that I could handle the weight of this dream. It was about resilience. I remember one night, after a grueling week of work, school, and training, I sat in my room with my head in my hands, wondering if I could keep going. My body was telling me to stop, to take a break. But every time I thought about giving in, I saw the faces of my parents in my mind. I heard their words, "You're not built for sports. You should be focusing on your studies, Tyler. Track isn't a career." And that was enough to fuel me. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of being right. That night, I worked through my exhaustion. I reviewed my training plans, set goals for the next week, and kept reminding myself that every drop of sweat, every aching muscle, was getting me closer to the dream. The work didn't stop there. Even after I'd secured a track scholarship to a top university, it felt like the grind was just beginning. College was a whole new level of competition, and the demands were even greater. I was still working part-time jobs, extra shifts in the gym, doing whatever I could to pay the bills, while trying to balance schoolwork and training. It was exhausting. There were nights when I had to choose between sleep and studying, between running and rest. I couldn't afford to let either slip, not when I was so close to the edge of making something of myself. But with every sacrifice, with every setback, I kept moving forward. The world could tell me that I wasn't good enough, that I didn't belong, but I knew what I was capable of. I had worked for this. It wasn't just about the glory or the recognition anymore. It was about proving that I had the strength to do what I had always dreamed of, no matter how impossible it seemed. No one else had the right to tell me what my limits were. Only I had that power. And even when the world seemed to be against me, I kept pushing. The more doors closed, the harder I worked. And somehow, as if by sheer will, those doors started to open. The scholarships, the opportunities, the chances to race at the highest level, they came. But I knew they came because I had earned them. I had put in the work, even when no one was watching. And all of it, every single sacrifice, every drop of sweat, was leading me somewhere. I wasn't going to stop until I reached the finish line, because this wasn't just my dream anymore, it was my reality. This was my time. The day the acceptance letter for the track scholarship arrived felt like a dream, except it wasn't. It was the real thing. I stood there in my small apartment, holding the letter in my hands, staring at it like it was some sort of miracle. I had worked for this moment for years, and now, it was finally here. I was going to college on a track scholarship. A chance to compete at the highest level, to take everything I had worked for and put it on display for the world to see. It was everything I had ever wanted. And yet, in the midst of my joy, something felt off. I had been so focused on this goal for so long that I had forgotten the one thing that had always been missing: my parents. Their absence felt like a heavy weight on my chest, especially as I looked around my small, cluttered room. This was the first major milestone I had reached without them, and somehow, it felt hollow. When I finally opened the letter, I had hoped for a different kind of recognition. Maybe a congratulatory message from them, maybe a simple acknowledgement of the hard work I had put in. But when I looked up, my phone buzzed with a message from Mom. "Tyler, I hope you're doing well. Emily's college graduation is next month, and we're so proud of her. She'll be attending a prestigious debate conference afterward. We'll be celebrating with a big family dinner. Let me know if you can make it." That was it. No mention of my scholarship, no recognition of the fact that I had just earned a place at a top university for track. I stared at the message, the words sinking in deeper than they should have. Emily's graduation was the highlight of the month. I had worked for this moment for years, and yet it felt like just another afterthought in their busy lives. I had known this would happen, of course. I had learned long ago not to expect too much from them, but that didn't make it hurt any less. They had never been there to support me in the way I needed, never there to watch me race, never there to congratulate me when I won. And as much as I hated to admit it, it stung to know they hadn't even recognized the biggest achievement of my life. I didn't reply to the message. I didn't know how to respond. Instead, I put the phone down and just sat there, holding the scholarship letter. For a brief moment, I felt that familiar ache, the one that came from wanting something more from the people who were supposed to love and believe in you. But the ache was different this time. I wasn't waiting for their approval anymore. I wasn't waiting for their applause. I had earned this on my own. The next day, I went to the track, as I always did. The familiar sound of my feet hitting the asphalt was like music to my ears. I was no longer running for anyone else. I wasn't running for approval or validation. I was running because it was in my bones, because it was the only thing that had ever made sense in my life. And when I stepped onto that track, I knew that I was leaving behind a version of myself that had spent too long seeking someone else's recognition. I had made it. I had earned my place, and I would no longer define my worth by anyone else's standards. The weeks that followed were a blur of excitement and anxiety. There was so much to do: prep for school, organize everything, try to get my head around the idea that I was actually going to college, that my future was about to change. It wasn't easy, especially without the support I had always hoped for from my family, but the one thing I had learned along the way was that I could stand on my own. I could carry the weight of my dreams by myself. On the day of Emily's graduation, I chose not to attend. It felt like the right decision, even though a part of me still wanted to be there, to see her, to make sure they saw me too. But I wasn't going to stand in the background of her moment any longer. I had my own path to follow now. The next day, as I packed up my things and prepared to leave for college, I took one last look at my tiny room. The walls, bare except for a few framed race photos, seemed to whisper reminders of all the years I had spent working in silence. All the sacrifices I had made. All the times I had pushed myself to keep going when everything else told me to stop. This scholarship wasn't just a ticket to a better future. It was proof that I was more than what others had told me I could be. It was my victory, and I was ready to claim it. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for anyone's approval. Not from my parents, not from my sister. This was my moment. I had earned it. College was a whole new world. When I arrived at the university, it was like stepping onto a different planet. Everything felt bigger, faster, and more intense than I had ever imagined. I was no longer just a kid running at a local high school track meet. I was now surrounded by some of the most talented athletes in the country. The pressure was overwhelming. The competition was fierce, and I was scared. My first few weeks were a blur of early mornings, long practices, and grueling workouts. I remember struggling to adjust to the demands of the college life, balancing schoolwork, training, and part-time jobs. It felt like I was constantly running on empty, never fully catching my breath. At times, I thought I might drown in it all. The stress of maintaining my grades while trying to prove myself as an athlete took a toll on me, both mentally and physically. But that's when I met Alex. Alex was a senior sprinter who had already been making waves in the national circuit. He was the kind of guy who looked like he belonged in every race, fast, determined, and effortless in his confidence. But he wasn't arrogant. He was the opposite. He took the time to talk to me, to offer advice, and to help me navigate the overwhelming pressure of college track. He saw my potential before I could even see it myself. "You've got what it takes," he told me the first time we worked out together. But it's all about consistency. You have to push yourself every day, even when it feels like your body is ready to quit. "You've got the speed, Tyler. Now you need to trust yourself." His words stayed with me, even on the days when my legs felt like lead and my body begged for rest. Alex taught me how to focus on the process rather than the result. He emphasized the importance of staying mentally tough, of not getting discouraged when things didn't go perfectly. Track, he said, was a game of inches, a game where your mind had to be as strong as your legs. It wasn't always smooth sailing. The next few months were filled with injuries, setbacks, and doubts. I'd run a race and finish behind competitors I had once thought I could beat. There were days when I wanted to give up, when the pressure felt too much, when I thought about walking away and focusing on something easier. But Alex was there, reminding me that progress wasn't linear. "I don't care about how you place today," Alex said after a tough race. "I care about the next one, and the one after that. You'll get there, just keep working." At 24, I finally qualified for the national team. It felt like the culmination of everything I had worked for, the 200-meter sprint, the race I had dreamed of being in since I was a child. It was a validation of everything I had fought for. But even then, standing on the verge of something big, I didn't feel the overwhelming joy I had expected. I felt exhausted and overwhelmed. I remember the moment I found out I had qualified. I had been training for weeks, feeling the weight of my responsibilities bearing down on me. I was sitting in the locker room, my muscles sore from the morning practice, when I checked my phone. The notification was there, the confirmation that I had made the national team. I stared at the screen for a long time, trying to process it, but all I could feel was a deep, aching tiredness. I had worked so hard for this, but I was so tired. I had spent years running in the shadows, pushing myself beyond limits I didn't even know I had. I had fought against the doubt of my parents, the competition from my sister, and the constant voice in my head telling me that maybe I wasn't cut out for this. But now I was here, on the national team. I had made it. The path to get here hadn't been easy. There had been so many moments of doubt, so many times when I had questioned whether I was good enough, whether I should just give up and follow the more practical path that everyone else seemed to want for me. But those moments of doubt were the ones that had shaped me. They had made me stronger, more determined. They had taught me to believe in myself when no one else would. Alex was the first one to congratulate me when I found out I had qualified. We were at the track and I had just finished a workout. He gave me a hard slap on the back, grinning like he'd won the race himself. "Told you you had it in you," he said. I laughed, shaking my head. "It doesn't feel real." "It will," he replied. "You've earned this, Tyler. Now it's time to show the world what you've got." And that's exactly what I planned to do. I was finally going to race with the best of the best, to show everyone, including my parents, that I wasn't just a dreamer, I was a contender. But even more than that, I was doing it for me. This was my moment. But the journey wasn't over. The road ahead was full of new challenges, new competitors, new doubts, and the constant pressure to keep proving myself. But I wasn't afraid. I had faced too much to back down now. And as the days passed, the upcoming race at the national championship loomed larger and larger. I was finally ready. My body, my mind, everything had been sharpened for this moment, and I wasn't going to waste it. The day of the Olympic 200-meter sprint felt surreal. My body, my mind, everything about me was poised for the race of a lifetime. I had trained for this moment for years, perhaps my entire life. This wasn't just another race, it was the race. The culmination of every early morning, every sacrifice, every setback. It was the moment I had dreamed about in the silence of my room when no one was watching. The moment that, in my darkest days, had seemed like an impossible fantasy. I stood in the tunnel just moments before stepping onto the track. The tension in the air was thick, almost suffocating. My heart beat against my ribcage like a drum, and I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. I glanced at my competitors, some of the fastest runners in the world. It was humbling, almost intimidating, but it only strengthened my resolve. I had earned my place here. I wasn't just going to compete, I was going to fight for that medal. The start signal blared in my ears, and the world narrowed down to the sound of my heartbeat and the rhythmic pounding of my feet on the track. My body flew forward with all the precision I had honed over the years. Every muscle, every fiber was tuned to perfection. I didn't look to my left or my right. All that mattered was the finish line ahead of me. I pushed myself harder than I ever had before. The final stretch was a blur of pain and power, my legs screaming, but I wasn't going to let up. Not now, not when everything I had worked for was within reach. I could hear the crowd, feel the tension rising as I surged forward. And then the finish line. I crossed it, my chest heaving, the world still spinning in the aftermath of the race. I didn't know where I had finished yet, but I knew I had given everything. My heart pounded in my ears as I slowed down, staggering across the line and collapsing into the arms of the nearest official. The world seemed to stand still for a few heartbeats before the roar of the crowd broke through. I had done it. The announcement echoed through the stadium. Bronze medalist, Tyler Brooks from the United States. I didn't hear the rest. All I could feel was the rush of relief, of triumph. My name was called, my country's anthem played, and I was on the podium, standing in front of the world, a dream made real. But as the ceremony continued, a strange thing happened. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I could feel it vibrating against my leg, a constant reminder of the life I had left behind, of the people who hadn't been there to witness this moment. I looked down, even as my national anthem rang in the background. The name on the screen made my heart skip. It was a message from my parents. "Tyler, we're so proud of you. Can you get us tickets?" The words on the screen hit me like a punch to the gut. I couldn't process it. I couldn't understand it. Here I was, standing on the biggest stage of my life, receiving the medal I had dreamed of for so long. And my parents, who had never once bothered to come watch me run, were asking for tickets, asking for a piece of something they had never believed I could achieve. The sting was immediate and sharp. I stood there, my gold and bronze medal around my neck, the roar of the crowd in my ears, and my mind reeling. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times, and never in my wildest dreams had I thought I'd be standing on that podium. My phone buzzing with a message asking for tickets. A message that was nothing but an afterthought to them, an attempt to latch onto a victory they had never cared to witness. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to shout, to scream, to let them know how much this moment meant to me and how empty it felt without them. The other part of me just wanted to let it go, to focus on the gold medal I had earned, to focus on my coach, my teammates, the people who had supported me through every race, every fall, every victory. I didn't reply to the text. I couldn't bring myself to. Instead, I stood there, staring at the medal around my neck, the crowd's cheers still ringing in my ears. I couldn't stop the flood of emotions that surged through me. This medal was mine. This victory was mine. It wasn't for them. It wasn't for anyone except me and the people who had believed in me from the start. Coach Evans's voice echoed in my mind, steady and calm. "This is yours, Tyler. You've earned this. Don't let anyone take it from you." And then I thought of Alex, who had always believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. The one person who had been there from the beginning, who had pushed me through my lowest moments, who had reminded me, time and time again, that I was capable of more than I could ever imagine. As the ceremony ended and the lights began to dim, I took a deep breath, looking out over the stadium one last time. This was it. I had made it. And no text message, no past disappointment, no absence from the people who were supposed to care could take that away from me. This was my moment. And as I walked off the podium, I knew that no matter what happened next, I had already won. Not just the medal, but the battle to define my own success, to chase my own dream, and to prove to myself that I could do it without anyone else's permission. It wasn't until the days after the Olympics that I began to truly understand what my victory meant. The excitement of the moment began to settle, and I found myself reflecting on everything that had led me here. The countless hours of training, the sacrifices I had made, the people who had believed in me, and the ones who hadn't. The days following my medal ceremony were a whirlwind of interviews, photo shoots, and celebrations. But in the quiet moments, when the noise of the world faded away, I thought about what really mattered. I thought about how I had gotten to this point, not just through my talent or my physical strength, but through my unwavering belief in myself. For so long, I had sought approval, especially from my parents. Their words had always echoed in my head. "Focus on your studies, Tyler. Sports aren't your future." Those words had hurt. They had made me question my worth, my passion, my place in the world. They had almost broken me, but they hadn't. Instead, those doubts had fueled my fire. Every time I ran for them. But every time I crossed that finish line, I did it for myself. I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need anyone's approval. But that didn't mean I was bitter. It didn't mean I hated them. It just meant I had finally understood that my journey was mine alone to walk, and no one else could define it. The moment I stood on that podium, the world watching, the national anthem playing, it wasn't about them or anyone else. It was about me and the path I had carved for myself. I think the biggest lesson I learned came from the realization that belief is everything. It's not about the doubters who tell you that you can't, or the people who dismiss your dreams as childish or impossible. It's about the one person who always believes in you. And it wasn't just my belief in myself that got me to this point. There were others along the way, people like Coach Evans, who took me under his wing and showed me the value of hard work, of pushing beyond limits, of trusting the process. People like Alex, who reminded me that success is built on consistency, not perfection. And even the teammates I had trained with, the ones who never judged, who simply encouraged me to be my best. I had learned that success isn't just about standing on the podium. It's about the quiet moments that lead up to it, the decisions you make when no one is watching, the discipline you show when the world tells you to quit, the courage to keep running even when the finish line seems far out of reach. And now I'm passing that lesson on. I became a coach for young athletes, sharing what I had learned from my own journey. I teach them to trust their potential, to push through the obstacles, and to never, ever let anyone else dictate their worth. I remind them that the road to success is long, and the path is never easy. But if they believe in themselves, if they put in the work, the victory will be theirs, just as it was mine. I tell them that dreams don't need permission to be chased. You don't need anyone else's approval to follow your heart, to pursue the impossible. The moment you believe in yourself fully, when you let go of the fear of failure and the need for validation, is the moment you set yourself free. Looking back at my journey, from the kids sneaking in morning runs to the high school track meets, to qualifying for the national team, and finally standing on that Olympic podium, I realized that it wasn't the medal that mattered the most. It was the journey. It was the growth, the lessons learned, and the resilience built through years of doubt, sweat, and pain. My parents may never fully understand what it took to get here, and that's okay. I've come to terms with it, but I no longer need them to validate my success. The victory is mine, no one can take it from me. And maybe that's the greatest lesson I can pass on to the next generation. Your dreams are yours. They don't belong to anyone else. And no matter how many people tell you that it's not possible, that it's too hard, that you'll never make it, don't stop. Keep going, keep pushing. Because the only one who can stop you is you. I've defied expectations. I've proven that no dream is too big, no challenge too great. And if you've ever felt like your dreams were too far out of reach, I want you to know they're not. So keep chasing, keep believing. Because if I can make it to the Olympics, if I can stand on that podium with the world watching, you can achieve anything you set your mind to. You don't need permission, you just need belief. And that's all you'll ever need to soar beyond the doubters.